Is Porzingis' health a ticking time bomb for the title run? Kristaps Porzingis might be the biggest question mark for the Boston Celtics this season, and perhaps the most uncomfortable issue that few dare to raise openly. When healthy, the Latvian big man is a piece that elevates the team's ceiling to a level that few NBA squads can reach. His perfect fit alongside Jayson, Tatum, and Jaylen gives the Celtics an offensive versatility that transforms them into an almost unstoppable machine. But is Porzingis' occasional brilliance masking a problem that could implode the team's title hopes at the most crucial moment? The prevailing narrative is that the Celtics have finally found the ideal center to complement their system, but that idea is built on a risky premise that Porzingis will be available when it matters most. So far, reality has suggested otherwise. Constant reports of minor injuries, discomforts, and precautionary absences have been piling up, and that's exactly what makes the more attentive fan wonder. Is Boston betting too high on a player whose absence could compromise the entire strategy built to win the championship? The most uncomfortable argument that nobody seems willing to discuss is whether Porzingis is worth all this patience. Wouldn't it be wiser to treat him as a luxury piece, a bonus, rather than an essential pillar for the title run? After all, what carries more weight on a championship team? Having Porzingis play 20 controlled minutes per game while staying healthy, or gambling everything on the hope that he can stay intact until June, only to lose him at the decisive moment? The issue isn't just physical, but strategic as well. The Celtics could adopt a more conservative approach, using Porzingis as a secret weapon in specific playoff moments, avoiding putting him under pressure in games that don't demand his presence. That alone would shift the team's dynamic, turning the Latvian into a tactical luxury rather than a necessity. But there's an even more controversial path. What if the Celtics should already be thinking about using Porzingis as a trade asset in the offseason? His potential impact in a playoff series is undeniable, but the emotional and tactical cost of relying on a player who could break down at any moment might simply not be worth the risk. Trading Porzingis before the problem escalates could be the unpopular decision that, in the end, saves the team's championship window. The biggest question hanging over the Celtics isn't whether Porzingis can help the team win the title. It's already clear that he can. The real question is, how far is the team willing to deceive itself with that idea and ignore that the greatest threat to their back-to-back title dreams might be inside their own locker room? Is Jrue Holiday becoming an untouchable player that no one dares to criticize? The Boston Celtics are having a season where almost everything seems to be working, but that doesn't mean every piece is fitting in the best way. Amid the dominant campaign, there's one protected figure that few dare to question: Jrue Holiday. Since his arrival, the point guard has become the perfect symbol of the veteran who makes the team win without needing to stand out. But this comfortable narrative might be hiding a problem that no one wants to discuss. To what extent has Holiday really been an indispensable piece, or just another weight the team carries out of pure convenience? The respect Jrue has earned in the NBA is unquestionable. He's a champion, a locker room leader, and perhaps the best perimeter defender in the league over the past 5 years. But the question few have the courage to raise is all that buying Holiday a free pass to play poorly on offense without being held accountable? The defense is still there, but his offensive impact has been declining month after month. The Celtics acquired Holiday to be a difference maker on both ends of the court, but what they've received so far is basically a luxury version of Marcus Smart. Plenty of hustle, plenty of defense, and very little offensive production. The point guard is posting his lowest points and field goal attempts per game since his rookie season, numbers that become even more glaring when compared to what he produced in Milwaukee. The difference is that with the Bucks, he was the third option in an already established system. In Boston, he was supposed to be the link that elevated the team to another level, but this drop in performance has gone largely unnoticed. Part of that is due to the media itself, which built an aura of untouchable veteran around Holiday from the moment he arrived. There's a lot of talk about his silent leadership and work ethic, but little questioning of the fact that, in practice, he's been a player making the Celtics more predictable offensively. The truth is, Holiday isn't just shooting less. He's shooting poorly. He's hitting only 33% of his three-pointers, even though most of his attempts are completely open looks, playing alongside Tatum, Brown, and Porzingis. If Derek White were putting up those numbers, the fanbase would already be calling for him to ride the bench. But with Drew, the narrative is always the same. His impact goes beyond the stats. But does it really? It's very easy to praise the veteran who does the little things when the team is winning, but the NBA has shown time and again that when May arrives, those are often the players who get exposed. Is Holiday an elite defender? No doubt. But the Celtics already had Derek White and Jaylen Brown to handle that role. What the team lacked was someone capable of creating plays and easing Tatum's burden as a playmaker. So far, Holiday has done exactly the opposite. He's playing like a role player, content to pass the ball and spot up on the perimeter. The uncomfortable question is, to what extent is Holiday helping the Celtics win? Or just making their offense more bureaucratic? There's a kind of silent hypocrisy in how the media treats Drew Holiday. When Marcus Smart put up these same numbers, he was called stubborn, reckless, and expendable. But when it's Holiday, the narrative shifts to veteran who knows what he's doing. The practical difference between the two has been much smaller than people think, especially on offense. The trickiest part of this discussion is the contract. The Celtics locked Holiday in for 4 more years, paying over $135 million through 2028. It's a deal that practically forces the team to treat him like a core piece, even if he's not playing like one. This bet was made with the idea that Holiday would be the perfect balance for the team. But what if, in reality, he's becoming an anchor holding back the Celtics' offensive ceiling? There's one argument that almost no one dares to make. What if the Celtics' offense would be better? Without Holiday, his presence makes the team safer defensively, but also more predictable. When Holiday shares the court with Derek White and Jaylen Brown, the offense becomes a rigid rotation of pick and rolls and isolations for Tatum. It's no coincidence that some of the Celtics' best stretches this season have come when White took over the point guard duties, while Holiday spent more time on the bench. Why doesn't anyone question Joe Mazzulla's strategy with Peyton Pritchard? Peyton Pritchard is the kind of player every championship team needs, but almost never values enough. Throughout the season, he has been the true blue-collar worker of the Boston Celtics, playing every game, bringing energy, defense, and scoring off the bench without complaining, even when the rotation seems designed to overlook his importance. What no one seems to have the courage to ask is, why does Joe Mazzulla insist on keeping Pritchard chained to a secondary role, even when he's clearly outplaying some of the team's more celebrated names? The argument that Mazzulla is simply preserving the hierarchy sounds more and more like an excuse for a coach who would rather die clinging to his rigid vision than sacrifice control in the name of immediate wins. The narrative that Pritchard is just filling a specific role in the rotation hides an uncomfortable truth. The Celtics might be sacrificing wins now in favor of a theoretical strategy that may not even survive until the playoffs. Mazzulla preaches a philosophy where every player has a predetermined function, like a chessboard where no piece can step out of its assigned square. But that approach ignores a basic rule of basketball. Those who play better play more. It's not about roles, it's about performance. And every time the team has dealt with injuries or rested starters, Pritchard has repeatedly proven to be the most reliable player outside the core group. So why does he keep getting the same 15 to 20 minutes per game, even when the team clearly needs more from him? What's most curious is how this situation would be treated if the name on the jersey were different. If Pritchard were a more hyped player or making $20 million per season, this decision would already be getting crushed by the media and fans as a tactical disaster. But because he's an undersized white point guard, drafted 26th overall, without much buzz, no one seems to care. The truth is that Mazzulla is taking advantage of Pritchard's low-profile personality to mask a stubbornness that borders on negligence. There's a comfortable narrative within the Celtics, and the NBA as a whole, that players like Pritchard are complementary pieces, never protagonists. But that's the same mentality that has cost several franchises championships. The Golden State Warriors only became a dynasty when Steve Kerr had the guts to bench David Lee and promote Draymond Green to the starting lineup, even when no one saw it coming. The Miami Heat only reached the finals in 2023 because Eric Spoelstra threw the manual out the window and bet everything on Caleb Martin. The Celtics are facing a similar crossroads, but Mazzulla seems more inclined to wait for a perfect script that might never come. What's stopping Pritchard from having a bigger role? His size? His lack of status? Or simply the coach's own fear of abandoning a tidy, theoretical strategy that could turn out to be fatal in practice? What's even more surprising is how Pritchard's name is never mentioned after the Celtics lose close games this season. The conversations revolve around injuries, Porzingis' restricted minutes, or Tatum and Brown's inconsistent nights. But no one asks if maybe the solution to some of those problems is already on the roster and being ignored out of sheer stubbornness. It feels like Mazzulla is playing chess in a rigged game of cards. He wants the Celtics to enter the playoffs with a rigid rotation where every player knows their role. But the playoffs aren't about fixed roles, they're about moments. And Peyton Pritchard is exactly the type of player who survives in the league by creating unexpected moments. The uncomfortable question is, will Mazzulla realize that before it's too late? Perhaps the biggest irony is that if the Celtics end the year without a championship, Pritchard will be one of the first names floated in trade rumors, all without ever getting a real chance to prove if he could be part of the solution instead of just another expendable piece. How long will the Celtics keep treating Pritchard like an emergency option when he's already proven he can be a difference maker in any game? And what if the boldest move isn't waiting for the intermittent glow of stars, but trusting the player who's always available? Is the Celtics roster more fragile than the media sells? The dominant narrative surrounding the Boston Celtics this season is that the team has built the deepest roster in the NBA, a group with no weak links, capable of remaining competitive even when facing absences. The prevailing sentiment in the media is that Brad Stevens has finally constructed a team where every player in the rotation could be a starter on at least half of the league's franchises. But what if this image of an enviable roster is nothing more than a carefully crafted illusion? The depth narrative works perfectly when everything goes according to plan, when the 5 starters are healthy, and Derek White and Peyton Pritchard come off the bench to make the team look like an unstoppable machine. But as soon as the Celtics lose a few players to injury, reality clashes with the narrative. This roster might be far more fragile than it appears. The uncomfortable truth that few are willing to discuss is that for a team sold as the top title favorite, the Celtics might actually have one of the most limited supporting casts in the league. The entire structure of the team was built around a core of 7 or 8 high-level players, and absolutely nothing beyond that. From the 8th spot in the rotation onward, what's left are players who wouldn't even crack the bench in most average teams, but are being sold as part of a deep bench simply because they wear the green and white jersey. Neemias Queta, Drew Peterson, Luke Cornett, Svi Mykhailiuk, Delano Banton. This is the Celtics' so-called deep bench when the team faces any stretch of absences. But why does no one talk about this? If it were the Milwaukee Bucks or Philadelphia 76ers rolling out these names in the rotation, the media would already be slamming their lack of depth. But with the Celtics, the narrative is always the same. It's part of Mazzulla's strategy to develop young players and preserve the roster for the playoffs. But is it really a strategy? Or does the Celtics simply not have a bench, and nobody wants to admit it? The easiest argument to defend this depth is to say that no team has a perfect roster, and that every team has end-of-the-bench players who only see the court in extreme situations. But the problem isn't having limited players in the last roster spots. The problem is that the Celtics are just 2 injuries away from needing these guys in significant minutes. If Porzingis and Al Horford are both out on the same night, Luke Cornett automatically becomes a starter. If Jaylen Brown or Jayson Tatum miss 2 or 3 consecutive games, Drew Peterson or Sam Hauser must play 20 minutes. It's no coincidence that every time the Celtics deal with injuries, the offense collapses and the team loses games it shouldn't, like the recent defeats to the Atlanta Hawks and Charlotte Hornets. The lingering feeling is that the Celtics have built a glass roster. Everything looks flawless when it's whole, but one crack is enough to make the entire structure crumble. That's because the entire rotation was built on an extremely risky gamble. The team simply cannot afford injuries. But here's the bigger issue. Since when is health guaranteed in the NBA? The Celtics themselves should know this better than anyone. Porzingis is a walking time bomb. Al Horford is almost 39 years old. And Malcolm Brogdon had to be traded precisely because he couldn't stay healthy. Even so, the front office decided to construct the entire team as if they were in a video game, where one button press restores everyone to 100% health by the time May rolls around. What no one is discussing is that this philosophy could backfire in the playoffs. The big danger is that the Celtics are flirting with the same mistake that doomed the Phoenix Suns last season, another team sold as an offensive powerhouse with a deep roster, only to end up relying on a handful of players carrying absurd minutes because there was simply no one to pick up the slack at the end of the bench. The silence around this issue has a lot to do with the current stage of the season. As long as the team is atop the Eastern Conference and winning most games, it's convenient for the media and the front office to maintain the illusion that the roster is perfect. But anyone who watches every game with a critical eye knows that the gap between the Celtics being a deep team and simply being a healthy team is much smaller than it seems. Is the Celtics' obsession with proving the Tatum and Brown duo works sacrificing the present to win an old debate? The obsession surrounding the Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown duo has become almost a matter of honor for the Boston Celtics, both for the franchise and part of the fan base. Since the two solidified themselves as stars, the dominant narrative has always been the same. They don't fit together, they don't complement each other, and they'll never win together. For 4 years, this discussion haunted the franchise, like a ghost, fueled by traumatic playoff losses and a media that always treated the duo's separation as something inevitable. The 2024 championship should have put an end to this conversation, but did it really? Or is the Celtics so obsessed with winning this old debate that they are starting to make the biggest mistake a franchise can make, believing too much in their own narrative? The feeling in the air is that the Celtics entered this season more concerned with proving they were right about not separating Tatum and Brown than actually building the best possible team to win again. The most obvious way to keep the team competitive was by making changes to the supporting cast. Brad Stevens could have used Malcolm Brogdon's expiring contract to acquire a more reliable piece, added veterans who truly changed the game, or even tinkered with more significant pieces to balance the team offensively. But the Celtics didn't do any of that. Instead, they chose to double down on a core that has already proven multiple times that it has limitations, as if the mere fact of keeping everything intact was a moral victory. And the most curious thing is that no one questions this. If any other franchise had invested nearly $600 million in the same duo that lost 2 conference finals in 3 years, the media would already be hammering that the team had become complacent. But with the Celtics, the narrative is always one of consistency and trust in the project. But to what extent is this trust really conviction? And to what extent is it just stubbornness disguised as patience? The big trap the Celtics might be falling into now is the illusion that the 2024 championship proved that the Tatum and Brown duo works regardless of the context around them. However, if there's one thing that championship proved, it's that the Celtics won because they had the most complete roster in the NBA. Not because Tatum and Brown finally became a perfect duo. The greatest achievement of the front office was surrounding the two with players who masked their limitations. Drew Holiday took on the role of secondary playmaker that Brown could never be. Porzingis provided the offensive threat in the paint that Tatum was never able to offer. Derek White became the real barometer of the team in critical moments. But now, the Celtics are acting as if all of this was just a bonus. As if the simple fact of keeping Tatum and Brown together is enough to repeat the success. The result is that the team seems to be sacrificing the present to protect a narrative from the past. When Porzingis misses games due to injury and the offense collapses, no one questions whether Brown should be taking on more responsibilities in playmaking. When Holiday has quiet offensive nights, no one raises the possibility that maybe the team needs a true ball handler coming off the bench. Everything is treated as if it's just a price to pay to preserve team chemistry and stay healthy for the playoffs. As if just putting the same 7 players on the court in May is enough to repeat last year's run. The problem is that the NBA doesn't work that way. Keeping the same core is always a risk in championship teams. And history is full of examples showing how the line between continuity and complacency is thinner than it seems. Even the Golden State Warriors fell into this trap after the 2022 championship, believing that keeping the group intact was enough to win again. The result was an early elimination the following year, and a team that already seems to have lost the timing to renew itself.